Hey guys, tonight we're going to unravel something together. Something you've believed for years, maybe decades. Myths about your own body that you've carried around like facts passed down from teachers, parents, health class posters, and well-meaning friends who are just as wrong as you are now. Before we begin, take a moment to like the video if you genuinely enjoy what we do here. Subscribe if you want more nights like this. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing who's joining us across the world, winding down, getting ready to drift off. Now, dim the lights. Maybe light a candle or turn on that soft lamp in the corner. Get your pillow just right. Pull the blanket up to your chin. Because tonight, we're not just learning biology. We're letting go of the false stories we've been told about our bodies, our brains, and the world living quietly inside us. You've been lied to, not maliciously, but confidently, by textbooks that oversimplified, by myths that sounded too good not to repeat, by science that's been updated, corrected, and quietly rewritten while no one told you. These aren't small mistakes either. They're fundamental misunderstandings about how you think, how you sense the world, how your memory works, even how your tongue tastes food. Some of these myths are so deeply embedded in culture that even knowing they're false won't stop you from hearing them repeated tomorrow. Your aunt will still tell you not to crack your knuckles. Your friend will still swear they only use 10% of their brain. A concerned parent will still blame sugar for a child's birthday party chaos. And somewhere, someone will confidently declare that goldfish can't remember anything for more than 3 seconds. But here's the beautiful part. Once you know the truth, once you see how much more interesting reality is than the myth, you can't unsee it. Your body becomes less of a machine you think you understand, and more of a mystery still revealing itself. Your brain isn't lazy or limited. Your senses aren't confined to 5 neat categories. Your tongue doesn't have a mapped out geography of taste. Everything is more complex, more elegant, and more wonderful than the simplified version you learned in school. Tonight, we're walking through 15 myths together. 15 beliefs that felt true because everyone repeated them. 15 corrections that make your body make more sense. And by the end, you'll see yourself a little differently. Not as someone who's been fooled, but as someone curious enough to question what they thought they knew. So let's ease into this journey together. 15 myths, 15 truths, and somewhere in between, maybe you'll drift off to sleep knowing your body just a little bit better. Let's begin. We start with the big one. The myth that's been repeated so often it feels like scientific fact. You've probably heard it in movies, read it in self-help books, maybe even used it to explain why you're not living up to your potential. The idea that you only use 10% of your brain. It sounds reasonable, doesn't it? Almost comforting, in a way. If you're only using 10%, that means 90% is sitting there, untapped, waiting for you to unlock it. Imagine what you could do if you could access the rest. You could learn languages overnight, solve complex equations, maybe even develop psychic powers. At least, that's what the myth promises. But here's the truth. You're already using all of your brain, not all at once, mind you, but throughout the day, throughout the week, every region of your brain lights up and does its job. There is no dormant 90% waiting to be activated. Your brain is already working at full capacity, quietly, efficiently, and beautifully.
So where did this myth come from? The most popular theory traces it back to the early 1900s, to psychologist William James,
who once wrote that the average person rarely achieves more than 10% of their intellectual potential. Notice the difference. He wasn't talking about brain usage. He was talking about potential, about effort, about not pushing yourself to learn and grow. But somewhere along the way, that nuanced statement got twisted into a biological claim. Others point to early neuroscience, back when researchers were just beginning to map the brain. They discovered that large portions of the brain didn't seem to respond to electrical stimulation in obvious ways. These areas were labeled silent, which led to speculation that they were unused. But silence didn't mean inactivity. It just meant scientists didn't yet understand what those regions were doing. The myth got another boost from advertisers and self-improvement gurus who loved the idea of untapped potential. It sold books, seminars, and miracle brain training programs. If you only use 10%, then surely there's a product that can help you access the rest. The myth became marketing gold. But modern neuroscience has put this idea to rest. Brain imaging technology, functional MRI scans, PET scans, these tools let researchers watch the brain in action in real time. And what they see is a brain that's constantly active. Even when you're lying still, eyes closed, doing nothing, your brain is humming with activity. Let's walk through what that actually looks like. Right now, as you listen to this, your auditory cortex is processing sound, translating vibrations into meaning. Your frontal lobe is paying attention, deciding what's important, what to remember, what to let drift away. Your limbic system is monitoring your emotional state, keeping you calm, keeping you engaged. Your cerebellum is maintaining your posture, even if you're lying down, making tiny adjustments so you don't roll off the bed. And that's just the conscious stuff. Beneath that, your brainstem is managing your breathing, your heart rate, your blood pressure. Your hypothalamus is regulating your body temperature, your hunger, your thirst. Your hippocampus is quietly filing away memories, deciding what's worth keeping and what can be discarded. All of this happening simultaneously, without you thinking about any of it. Throughout the day, different regions take turns being more active. When you read, your visual cortex and language centers light up. When you solve a math problem, your parietal lobe gets to work. When you remember a face, your fusiform gyrus activates. When you feel a rush of emotion, your amygdala responds. Over the course of 24 hours, every part of your brain gets its moment. Even during sleep, your brain is anything but idle. While you're unconscious, it's consolidating memories, clearing out metabolic waste, running maintenance checks on neural connections. Your brain uses about 20% of your body's total energy, even though it only makes up about 2% of your body weight. That's a staggering amount of fuel for an organ that's supposedly 90% dormant. In fact, if you really were only using 10% of your brain, you'd be in serious trouble. Brain damage studies show us this clearly. Even small injuries to the brain, a stroke affecting just a tiny region, can have devastating consequences. Loss of speech, loss of movement, loss of memory, loss of personality. If 90% of the brain were expendable, these injuries wouldn't matter, but they do. Every region, every neuron, every connection serves a purpose. The myth is also harmful in a quieter way. It underestimates what your brain is already doing. It makes you think you're not enough, that there's some hidden reserve you're failing to tap into. But the truth is, your brain is already extraordinary. It's processing millions of sensory inputs every second, filtering out noise, highlighting what matters, building a coherent experience of reality from chaotic data. You don't need to unlock some secret portion of your brain. You just need to appreciate the portion you're already using. The part that lets you think, dream, feel, remember, imagine, and create. The part that's kept you alive every single day of your life without you having to consciously manage your breathing or remind your heart to beat. So no, you're not using just 10% of your brain, you're using all of it, and it's already working harder, smarter, and more efficiently than any computer ever built. The myth promised you untapped potential, but the truth offers something better. The recognition that you're already complete, already capable, already enough. Your brain isn't holding back. It's been giving you everything it has, all along. And that's more miraculous than any myth could ever be. But speaking of miracles, let's talk about something you've probably never questioned. The 5 senses. Except there aren't 5. Not even close. You've been taught since childhood that humans have 5 senses: sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. It's simple, neat, and easy to remember. Kindergarten teachers draw little diagrams. Science textbooks list them in bold. Pop quizzes ask you to name all 5. And you can, without hesitation. But here's the problem. It's wrong. Not a little wrong. Fundamentally, completely wrong. You don't have 5 senses. You have far more than that. And the fact that this myth persists, even in modern education, says more about our love of simplicity than our understanding of biology. The 5-sense model comes from Aristotle, the ancient Greek philosopher who lived over 2,000 years ago. He observed the world, made lists, and tried to categorize everything into neat groups. For the human body, he identified 5 ways we perceive the world, and for centuries no one questioned him. Why would they? Aristotle was brilliant. His categories felt complete. But Aristotle didn't have microscopes. He didn't have neuroscience. He didn't know about receptors, neurons, or the intricate networks that let your body sense things he never imagined. He was working with observation alone, and observation, while valuable, has limits. Let's start with the senses he missed, the ones you use every single day without even realizing it. First, there's proprioception. That's your sense of where your body is in space. Close your eyes right now. You still know where your hands are, don't you? You know if your legs are crossed or stretched out. You know the position of your head, the angle of your arms. You're not guessing. You're sensing. Proprioception comes from receptors in your muscles, tendons, and joints. They send constant signals to your brain, creating a map of your body's position. Without it, you couldn't walk, type, or pick up a glass of water without looking. You'd have to visually confirm every single movement. But you don't. Your body tracks itself automatically, seamlessly, invisibly. Then there's equilibrioception, your sense of balance. This one lives in your inner ear, in 3 tiny semicircular canals filled with fluid. When you tilt your head, the fluid shifts, bending tiny hair cells that send signals to your brain. That's how you know you're upright, leaning, spinning, or falling. Close your eyes and tilt your head to the side. You feel it, don't you? That's not touch. That's balance. Next, thermoception. Your sense of temperature. You have separate receptors for heat and cold scattered across your skin and inside your body. They don't just tell you if something is hot or cold. They tell you if it's getting hotter or colder, if the change is gradual or sudden, if it's dangerous or just uncomfortable. Walk from a warm room into a cold one, and you feel the shift before you see your breath. And then there's nociception, the sense of pain. You might think pain is just intense touch, but it's not. Pain has its own dedicated receptors, its own neural pathways, its own processing centers in the brain. You can feel pain without touch. A headache, for example, or the deep ache of sore muscles. Pain is its own language, a warning system that tells you something is wrong. But we're not done. You also have a sense of time, not the kind you track with a clock, but the internal sense of duration, the feeling that a minute has passed or an hour. Your brain has circuits that estimate time, that let you know when something has gone on too long or ended too quickly. It's not perfectly accurate, and it warps under stress or boredom, but it's there, ticking quietly in the background. There's also interoception, your sense of what's happening inside your body. Hunger is a sense. Thirst is a sense. The feeling of a full bladder, the need to breathe, the sensation of your heartbeat quickening. These aren't emotion. They're signals from internal receptors telling you what your organs need, what your systems are doing, what requires attention. Some scientists even argue for a sense of agency, the feeling that you're the one controlling your actions. It sounds abstract, but think about it. When you move your hand, you know you moved it. You don't feel like someone else did it. That sense of ownership, of authorship over your movements, comes from specific brain regions. When those regions are damaged, people lose that sense. They'll move their hand and insist someone else moved it for them. And there's more. Chemoreceptors in your blood monitor oxygen and carbon dioxide levels, triggering the urge to breathe. Stretch receptors in your lungs and stomach tell you when they're full. Baroreceptors in your blood vessels sense pressure changes. Magnetoreception, the ability to sense magnetic fields, exists in many animals and might even exist in humans, though the research is still unfolding. Even the so-called five senses are more complex than Aristotle imagined. Take taste, for example. You don't just taste sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. You also sense texture, temperature, and even pain when you bite into something spicy. Spiciness isn't a taste. It's a pain signal from receptors that respond to capsaicin, the chemical in chili peppers. Your tongue is feeling heat and danger, not flavor. Touch, too, is not one sense. It's several. You have separate receptors for pressure, vibration, stretch, and texture. Light touch feels different from deep pressure. A feather on your skin activates different neurons than a firm handshake. Some parts of your body are more sensitive than others, packed with more receptors, sending denser signals to the brain. So why does the five-sense model persist? Partly because it's simple, partly because it's traditional, and partly because we don't think about the senses we use unconsciously. You don't wake up and think, "Thank goodness for proprioception." You just reach for your phone in the dark and find it. You don't celebrate your sense of balance. You just stand up without falling over. But these uncelebrated senses are what allow you to move through the world with grace and confidence. They're what let you know you're alive, not just intellectually, but physically. You are always sensing, always receiving signals, always processing information from a dozen different streams at once. The five-sense model limits us. It makes us think perception is simple, that the outside world comes in through 5 doors and that's it. But perception is vast, layered, and continuous. You're not just observing reality. You're inhabiting it through skin and bone and blood and balance, through pathways Aristotle never dreamed of. You are sensing far more than you realize, every single second. Your body is telling you stories that your conscious mind never hears, but your brain listens to all the same. And now that you know, you can't unhear them. But let's move to another myth, one that's managed to slander an entire species for decades. There's a creature that's been unfairly slandered for decades, dismissed as simple, forgetful, incapable of learning. You've probably heard the myth yourself, maybe even repeated it. Goldfish have a memory span of only 3 seconds. 3. Just long enough to swim across their bowl and forget where they started. It's the kind of fact that gets passed around at dinner parties, used as an insult for someone who's chronically forgetful, turned into memes and jokes. Poor goldfish, people say. Imagine living like that. Imagine forgetting everything every 3 seconds. No past, no future, just an endless, confused present. Except it's not true. Not even close. Goldfish have memories that last for months. They can recognize human faces. They can learn routines, solve problems, and even be trained to perform tricks. The 3-second myth is one of the most persistent lies in popular biology, and it tells us more about human assumptions than it does about fish. So, where did this myth come from? No one knows for certain. There's no landmark study that claimed goldfish have 3-second memories. It seems to have emerged from nowhere, a piece of folk wisdom that sounded plausible enough to stick. Maybe it came from watching goldfish swim in circles, repeating the same path over and over. Maybe it came from the assumption that small brains mean small minds. Whatever the origin, it spread quickly and never let go. But scientists have tested goldfish memory extensively, and the results are remarkable. In one study, researchers trained goldfish to push a lever at a specific time of day to receive food. The fish learned the schedule, they remembered it, and they showed up at the right time, day after day, for weeks. That's not 3 seconds. That's long-term memory, planning, and anticipation. In another experiment, goldfish were taught to navigate a maze. They made mistakes at first, bumping into walls, taking wrong turns. But over time, they learned the correct path, and when researchers tested them again weeks later, the fish still remembered. They swam through the maze faster, more confidently, using memory to guide them. Goldfish can also learn to associate specific sounds with feeding times. Ring a bell before feeding them, and they'll quickly learn that the sound means food is coming. Even months later, if you ring that same bell, they'll respond. They remember, they connect cause and effect. They anticipate the future based on the past. Some goldfish can even recognize individual human faces. In studies where different people fed the fish, the goldfish learned to distinguish between them. They'd approach the person who usually fed them and ignore or avoid others. That requires visual memory, pattern recognition, and social learning. Not bad for a creature we've written off as brain dead. And it's not just goldfish. This myth reflects a broader problem in how we think about animal intelligence. We tend to assume that animals, especially small ones, especially ones that live in water, don't think, don't feel, don't remember. We project simplicity onto them because it's easier than confronting the complexity of other minds. But memory is widespread in the animal kingdom. Crows remember human faces for years and hold grudges against people who've wronged them. Octopuses solve puzzles, escape from tanks, and remember which humans are friendly. Bees communicate the location of flowers to their hive mates through intricate dances and remember which flowers they've already visited. Even fruit flies, with their tiny brains, can form long-term memories. Memory isn't a luxury of large brains or complex nervous systems. It's a survival tool. If you can't remember where food is, where danger lurks, or which paths are safe, you don't survive long. Evolution doesn't waste resources. If goldfish didn't need memory, they wouldn't have it. But they do, because memory matters. So why does the myth persist, even in the face of evidence? Partly because it's been repeated so many times that it feels true. Partly because people don't fact-check claims about animals, and partly because admitting goldfish have good memories forces us to reconsider how we treat them. If they remember, if they learn, if they feel, then keeping them in a tiny bowl, alone, with nothing to do, starts to feel cruel. There's also something oddly comforting about the myth. If goldfish forget everything every 3 seconds, then they're not really suffering, are they? They're not bored. They're not lonely. They're just swimming, endlessly content in their ignorance. It's a convenient fiction that lets us off the hook. But the truth is harder and more interesting. Goldfish are not simple. They're not perpetually confused. They're navigating their world with memory, learning, and adaptation, just like every other living creature. They may not write poetry or solve calculus, but they're doing exactly what they need to do to survive, and they're doing it well. This myth also reveals something about how we measure intelligence. We tend to value the kinds of thinking we're good at: abstract reasoning, language, tool use. But intelligence comes in many forms. A goldfish doesn't need to read, but it needs to remember the geography of a pond, the timing of predators, the location of food. That's intelligence tailored to its environment. And it works. In fact, goldfish brains are more sophisticated than we give them credit for. They have a forebrain, a midbrain, and a hindbrain, just like us. They have structures analogous to our hippocampus, the region responsible for memory formation. Their brains aren't identical to ours, but they're not primitive either. They're specialized, efficient, and perfectly suited to the life of a fish. So the next time someone tells you goldfish have 3-second memories, you can gently correct them. Tell them about the maze studies, the feeding schedules, the face recognition. Tell them that goldfish remember for months, that they learn, that they adapt. Tell them the myth is just that, a myth, and a lazy one at that. Memory isn't a measure of worth. A creature doesn't need human-level cognition to deserve respect, but knowing that goldfish remember, that they're more aware than we assumed, makes them more real, more present, more deserving of consideration, and maybe that's the real lesson here. We underestimate the minds around us, not because the evidence is lacking, but because we're not paying attention. But speaking of myths, we've stopped questioning. Let's talk about body heat, winter advice, and a misunderstood military study. It's winter, and you're about to step outside. Your mother, your grandmother, maybe even a well-meaning stranger stops you. "Where's your hat?" they ask. "Don't you know you lose most of your body heat through your head? Put on a hat, or you'll freeze." It's advice you've heard 100 times, advice that feels like common sense, advice that's backed by decades of repetition. Except it's wrong. You don't lose most of your body heat through your head, not even close. The myth claims you lose somewhere between 40 and 70% of your heat through your scalp, which would make your head a thermal disaster zone, a gaping wound in your body's defenses against the cold. But the truth is far less dramatic and far more logical. You lose heat through your head at roughly the same rate you lose heat through any other exposed part of your body. Your head accounts for about 10% of your body's surface area, and in cold conditions it loses about 10% of your heat. That's it. No special vulnerability, no thermal black hole, just normal, proportional heat loss. So where did this myth come from? The most popular explanation traces it back to a military study conducted in the 1950s. The U.S. Army was testing cold weather survival gear, so they dressed volunteers in Arctic survival suits and exposed them to frigid temperatures. The suits covered everything except the volunteers' heads. And sure enough, the researchers noted significant heat loss from the head. But here's the critical part. The head was the only part exposed. Of course, it lost the most heat. It was the only part that could. If they'd left a hand uncovered, the hand would have lost the most heat. If they'd exposed a foot, the foot would have been the problem. The study wasn't measuring the head's special heat loss properties. It was measuring what happens when you leave any body part uncovered in the coal. Somehow, that nuance got lost. The study's findings were misinterpreted, oversimplified, and repeated until they became accepted wisdom. Parents told children, teachers told students, coaches told athletes, and the myth embedded itself so deeply into culture that even today, people will argue passionately that hats are the most important piece of winter clothing. Let's talk about how your body actually regulates heat, because it's a far more interesting story than the myth suggests. Your body is constantly producing heat as a byproduct of metabolism. Every cell, every chemical reaction, every heartbeat generates warmth. On a cold day, your body works to conserve that heat, narrowing blood vessels near the skin to keep warm blood closer to your core. But your body also has to release some heat, even in the cold, to prevent overheating. That's where your skin comes in. Heat radiates from any exposed surface. The larger the surface area, the more heat you lose. Your torso is large, so it has the potential to lose a lot of heat. Your legs are long, so they do too. Your head, by comparison, is relatively small. The myth likely persists because your head feels cold quickly, and there's a reason for that. Your face and scalp are densely packed with nerve endings, more so than most other parts of your body. You're more sensitive to temperature changes there. So when cold air hits your head, you feel it intensely. That sensation tricks you into thinking you're losing more heat than you actually are. Your head also stays exposed more often than other body parts. In mild cold, you might skip a hat but still wear a coat and gloves. So your head ends up being the primary site of heat loss, not because it's special, but because it's uncovered. The myth confuses correlation with causation. There is one small exception worth noting. Babies do lose a higher proportion of heat through their heads, but only because their heads are proportionally larger compared to their bodies. A newborn's head might account for 20% of their surface area instead of 10%. So yes, keep a hat on a baby in the cold. But that's basic math, not a unique biological feature. For adults, the science is clear. If you want to stay warm, cover all your exposed skin, not just your head. A hat helps, absolutely. But so do gloves, a scarf, thick socks, and a good coat. Heat loss is distributed across your entire body. There's no magic bullet, no single garment that will solve the problem. In fact, studies have shown that wearing a hat in freezing weather keeps you about as warm as wearing gloves or covering your neck. They're all helpful. They're all roughly equivalent. The idea that a hat is 10 times more important than anything else is fiction. There's also the question of why this myth matters. Does it hurt anyone to wear a hat? Of course not. Hats are useful, but the myth misrepresents how your body works. And that kind of misunderstanding, even a harmless one, chips away at scientific literacy. It's a small thing, sure, but small things add up. It also reflects a broader pattern. We latch onto simple explanations, even when they're wrong, because they're easier to remember and repeat. The head loses. Most of your heat is a cleaner story than heat loss is proportional to exposed surface area. One fits on a bumper sticker. The other requires a paragraph. But you deserve the real story. Your body is a finely tuned system, balancing heat production and heat loss across every inch of skin. Your head isn't a weak point. It's not leaking warmth like a broken window. It's just doing what every other part of your body does, radiating heat in proportion to its size. So, wear a hat if you want to. Wear one because it's cold, because it's windy, because it keeps your ears from aching. But don't wear one because you think your head is hemorrhaging heat while the rest of your body stays cozy. That's not how thermodynamics works. That's not how your body works. Your whole body is working to keep you warm, not just your head. Every cell, every vessel, every shiver is part of the same system. And understanding that system, even in small ways, makes you a little less susceptible to myths that sound true but aren't. Next, let's talk about sugar, childhood chaos, and a myth that shaped parenting for generations. Picture a child's birthday party. Cake, frosting, candy, soda. Within minutes, the kids are running, screaming, bouncing off walls like they've been possessed by tiny, sugar-fueled demons. The parents exchange knowing looks. It's the sugar, they say. Sugar makes kids hyperactive. Everyone knows that. It's obvious. Just look at them. Except it's not the sugar. It never was. Decades of research have tested this belief over and over using double-blind studies, controlled conditions, and careful observation. And the conclusion is consistent. Sugar does not cause hyperactivity in children, not even a little bit. What you're seeing at that birthday party isn't a chemical reaction. It's context, expectation, and excitement dressed up as science. The myth is so widespread that even mentioning it feels controversial. Parents will swear they've seen it with their own eyes. Teachers will nod in agreement. Entire parenting strategies are built around limiting sugar to avoid the inevitable chaos. But believing something doesn't make it true, no matter how many people believe it or how obvious it seems. So, where did this myth come from? In the 1970s, a doctor named Benjamin Feingold proposed that artificial food additives, including sugar, caused hyperactivity and behavioral problems in children. His theory gained traction quickly, especially among parents desperate for an explanation for their child's difficult behavior. The Feingold diet, which eliminated sugar and additives, became popular. Testimonials poured in. It seemed to work. But anecdotes aren't evidence. When researchers actually tested Feingold's claims in controlled studies, they found no link between sugar and hyperactivity. Children given sugar behaved no differently than children given a placebo. The myth should have died there, but it didn't. It was too convenient, too intuitive, too emotionally satisfying to let go. One of the most telling studies was conducted in 1994. Researchers gave children either sugar or a placebo, a substance that looked and tasted like sugar but had no actual sugar content. Neither the children nor their parents knew who got what. Then, the parents were asked to observe their children and rate their behavior. Here's where it gets interesting. Parents who believed their child had consumed sugar rated them as significantly more hyperactive, even when the child had only received the placebo. In other words, the parents saw what they expected to see. The belief shaped the observation. The myth created its own evidence. But what about the obvious chaos at birthday parties? If it's not the sugar, then what is it? The answer is simpler than you think. Birthday parties are exciting. They're loud, overstimulating, and full of friends. There are games, decorations, presents, and yes, sugar, but also noise, competition, and social energy. Kids get wound up because the situation is inherently stimulating, not because of what they ate. Take the same child, give them the same amount of sugar in a quiet room with nothing to do, and you won't see hyperactivity. You'll see a kid eating candy. The environment matters, the context matters, the sugar is just along for the ride. There's also a timing issue. Sugar is often consumed at moments that are already high energy. Halloween, birthday parties, holidays, movie nights. These aren't calm, controlled settings. They're celebrations. So we associate sugar with excitement because we encounter them together, not because one causes the other. And then there's the expectation effect. If you believe sugar causes hyperactivity, you'll watch for it. You'll notice every loud laugh, every burst of energy, every moment of chaos, and attribute it to the candy. Meanwhile, you'll ignore the quiet moments, the times your child ate sugar and then sat down to read or watch TV. Confirmation bias is powerful. It makes myths feel like facts. The science on sugar and behavior is remarkably consistent. Study after study has found no causal link. A meta-analysis, which combines data from multiple studies to look for patterns, reviewed 23 separate experiments. The conclusion was clear. Sugar does not affect the behavior or cognitive performance of children. Not their activity levels, not their attention spans, not their ability to focus. Now, that doesn't mean sugar is harmless. It's not. Excess sugar contributes to obesity, tooth decay, and metabolic issues. It spikes blood glucose and then causes a crash, which can affect mood and energy in the long term. But that's not hyperactivity. That's fatigue. And it happens over hours, not minutes. There's also the question of why this myth feels so believable. Part of it is that we're looking for explanations. Parenting is hard. Kids have energy that seems endless and irrational. If you can point to a cause, something tangible like sugar, then you feel like you have control. You can limit sugar and solve the problem. It's empowering, even if it's not accurate. But blaming sugar also lets us ignore other factors. Sleep deprivation, lack of structure, overstimulation, underlying behavioral issues, these are harder to address than just cutting out candy. Sugar becomes a convenient scapegoat, a simple answer to a complex question. And here's the strangest part. The belief itself might cause problems. If you tell a child they're going to go crazy after eating sugar, they might unconsciously perform that role. If you treat sugar like a forbidden, powerful substance, it gains emotional weight. Kids start associating it with loss of control, with being bad, with chaos, and that psychological layer complicates everything. The truth is, children are naturally high energy. They're exploratory, impulsive, and easily excited. That's not a bug. That's a feature. Their brains are wired to seek novelty, test boundaries, and engage physically with the world. Add a stimulating environment, and that energy amplifies. Remove the environment, and it settles, regardless of sugar intake. So no, sugar doesn't make kids hyperactive. What you're seeing is a collision of excitement, context, and expectation, filtered through a myth so pervasive it's mistaken for common sense. But common sense isn't always right. Sometimes it's just common. The next time you see a child bouncing around after cake, consider the full picture. The party, the friends, the games, the sheer joy of celebration. That's not chemistry, that's childhood. And blaming the frosting misses the point entirely. Speaking of things we blame without evidence, let's talk about hydration, arbitrary rules, and 8 glasses of water that never made sense. You've heard the rule your entire life. Drink 8 glasses of water a day. 8 8-ounce glasses, to be exact. 64 ounces total. It's been repeated by doctors, fitness influencers, wellness blogs, and that one co-worker who's always carrying a gallon jug with motivational time markers printed on the side. It's treated as gospel, as if your body will shut down if you drink 63 ounces instead of 64. But here's the uncomfortable truth. There's no scientific basis for the 8 glasses rule. None. No study ever proved that humans need exactly 8 glasses of water per day. The recommendation is arbitrary, oversimplified, and completely divorced from how your body actually regulates hydration. You don't need 8 glasses, you need however much your body tells you it needs, and that amount changes constantly. So where did this myth come from? The most commonly cited origin is a 1945 report from the Food and Nutrition Board of the National Research Council. The report suggested that a suitable allowance of water for adults is 2.5 litres per day, which is roughly 8 glasses. Sounds official, right? Case closed. Except there's a sentence that immediately follows that recommendation. A sentence that almost never gets quoted. Most of this quantity is contained in prepared foods. In other words, you don't need to drink 8 glasses of pure water because you're already getting water from fruits, vegetables, soups, coffee, tea, and almost everything else you eat. The report wasn't telling you to drink 8 extra glasses. It was estimating your total water intake from all sources. But that nuance disappeared. The 8 glasses rule got simplified, stripped of context, and turned into a commandment. Drink 8 glasses of water, pure water, every day, no exceptions. And suddenly, people who'd been perfectly hydrated their entire lives started worrying they weren't drinking enough. Let's talk about how hydration actually works, because your body is far smarter than any arbitrary rule. You have a built-in hydration monitoring system, and it's remarkably precise. When your blood becomes too concentrated, when you're losing more water than you're taking in, your hypothalamus detects the change and triggers the sensation of thirst. That's it. That's the signal. You feel thirsty, you drink. Problem solved. Thirst isn't a malfunction. It's not your body failing to keep up. It's a finely tuned feedback loop that's been keeping humans alive for hundreds of thousands of years, long before anyone was counting glasses. If you're thirsty, drink. If you're not, you're probably fine. But the myth has convinced people that thirst isn't trustworthy, that by the time you feel thirsty, you're already dangerously dehydrated. That's not true. Thirst kicks in well before dehydration becomes a problem. It's an early warning system, not a last-ditch alarm. Mild thirst is normal, expected, and perfectly safe. Your hydration needs also vary wildly depending on factors the 8 glasses rule completely ignores. Your size, for example. A person who weighs 200 pounds needs more water than someone who weighs 120. Your activity level matters. If you're running a marathon, you need more water than if you're sitting at a desk. Climate plays a role. You sweat more in Phoenix in July than in Seattle in November. Even your diet affects hydration. If you eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, foods with high water content like watermelon, cucumbers, oranges, and lettuce, you're getting significant hydration from your meals. A person who eats mostly fresh produce needs to drink less water than someone who eats mostly dry, processed foods. The 8 glasses rule doesn't account for any of this. And let's talk about overhydration, because yes, that's a real thing. Drinking too much water can dilute the sodium in your blood, a condition called hyponatremia. It's rare, but it happens, especially among endurance athletes who drink excessive amounts of water without replacing electrolytes. Symptoms include nausea, headache, confusion, and in severe cases, seizures or even death. Water intoxication is real, and the 8 glasses rule doesn't warn you about it. There's also no evidence that drinking more water than you need provides extra health benefits. It doesn't flush toxins any better. Your kidneys already do that, and they do it efficiently. Whether you drink 8 glasses or 4, it doesn't improve your skin. Skin hydration comes from the deeper layers, not from chugging water. It doesn't boost your metabolism or help you lose weight, except in the sense that drinking water before a meal might make you feel fuller and eat less. The myth has also spawned an entire industry. Water bottles with measurements, apps that remind you to drink, infuser bottles, gallon jugs, hydration challenges. There's nothing wrong with drinking water, obviously, but the obsession with hitting a specific number has turned hydration into a chore, a box to check, a source of guilt if you fall short. Here's what actually matters. Drink when you're thirsty. Pay attention to your body. If your urine is pale yellow, you're hydrated. If it's dark, concentrated, you might need more fluids. If you're exercising hard, in hot weather, or sick with a fever, drink more. If you're sitting in air conditioning all day, you probably don't need to force down water. Your body is constantly adjusting, constantly balancing. It knows how much water it needs far better than any chart or app. The 8 glasses rule treats hydration like a one-size-fits-all prescription, but biology doesn't work that way. You're not a generic human. You're a specific person with specific needs that change hour by hour. And here's the irony. For most of human history, we didn't carry water bottles everywhere. We didn't track our intake. We just drank when we were thirsty, and we survived. We thrived. Our ancestors crossed deserts, climbed mountains, built civilizations, all without worrying about hitting 64 ounces a day. They trusted their bodies. Maybe we should too. So, let go of the guilt. Let go of the arbitrary number. If you enjoy drinking lots of water, great. If you prefer tea, coffee, milk, juice, that's fine too. It all counts. Hydration isn't a test you can fail. It's a conversation between you and your body has been holding up its end of the conversation perfectly well, without any help from a myth invented in 1945. Trust your thirst. Trust your body. It's been keeping you alive this long. It knows what it's doing. But speaking of things we've been told to avoid, let's talk about your knuckles, that satisfying pop, and the arthritis warning that never came true. You're sitting quietly, maybe reading, maybe waiting, and without thinking, you crack your knuckles. That sharp, satisfying pop echoes through the room, and immediately someone nearby reacts. Stop that, they say. You'll get arthritis. Your joints will seize up. You'll regret it when you're older. It's a warning you've heard so many times it feels like medical fact, passed down through generations like folklore with a white coat. But it's not true. Cracking your knuckles does not cause arthritis. Not a little bit, not over time, not even if you do it every single day for decades. The warning is baseless, unsupported by science, and rooted entirely in the assumption that something that sounds bad must be bad. But biology doesn't work on assumptions. It works on evidence, and the evidence is clear.
So where did this myth come from? Probably from the sound itself. That pop is loud, sudden, and vaguely unsettling.
It sounds like something breaking, like bone grinding against bone, like damage happening in real time. If you don't know what's actually causing the noise, it's easy to imagine the worst. And once that image takes hold, once people start associating the pop with joint destruction, the myth becomes self-reinforcing. But let's talk about what's actually happening when you crack your knuckles, because it's far less alarming than the myth suggests. Your joints are surrounded by synovial fluid, a thick, slippery liquid that lubricates movement and cushions the bones. This fluid contains dissolved gases, mostly nitrogen, carbon dioxide, and oxygen. When you pull or bend your fingers in a certain way, you increase the space in the joint capsule. The pressure drops. And when pressure drops, gases come out of solution, forming tiny bubbles. That's the pop. It's not bone cracking. It's not cartilage tearing. It's gas bubbles forming and collapsing in the fluid around your joints. Scientists call it cavitation. It's the same process that happens when you open a bottle of soda. The pressure releases, the gas escapes, and you hear a sound. Your knuckles are doing the same thing, just on a smaller, wetter scale. For years, researchers debated whether the sound came from bubbles forming or bubbles collapsing. In 2015, a team of scientists at the University of Alberta settled the question using real-time MRI imaging. They watched someone crack their knuckles inside the machine and captured the exact moment of the pop. What they saw was a cavity, a gap, appearing suddenly in the joint as the bones separated. The bubble formed, and that formation, that rapid creation of space, was what caused the sound. After you crack a knuckle, you usually can't crack it again right away. That's because the gases need time to dissolve back into the synovial fluid. It takes about 20 to 30 minutes for the joint to reset. That refractory period has nothing to do with damage or healing. It's just chemistry, gases redistributing, pressure equalizing. Now, if cracking your knuckles caused arthritis, we'd expect to see a clear link in the data. People who crack their knuckles regularly should develop arthritis at higher rates than people who don't. But study after study has found no such connection. One of the most famous examples comes from Dr. Donald Unger, a physician who spent 60 years conducting an experiment on himself. Every day, he cracked the knuckles on his left hand, but never cracked the knuckles on his right. After 6 decades, he compared both hands. No arthritis in either. He even won an Ig Nobel Prize for his dedication to debunking the myth. Larger studies have confirmed his findings. Researchers have compared habitual knuckle crackers with non-crackers and found no difference in arthritis rates. They've looked at grip strength, joint swelling, and range of motion. Nothing. Cracking your knuckles doesn't damage your joints, doesn't wear down cartilage, and doesn't increase your risk of arthritis. So, what does cause arthritis? The most common form, osteoarthritis, is caused by wear and tear on the cartilage that cushions your joints. Age is the biggest factor. The older you get, the more likely you are to develop it. Genetics play a role. Some people are simply predisposed. Injuries matter too. If you've broken a bone or torn a ligament, that joint is more vulnerable later in life. Repetitive stress from certain jobs or sports can contribute. Obesity increases risk because extra weight puts more pressure on joints, especially knees and hips. But casual joint popping? Not on the list. Your knuckles aren't fragile. The act of cracking them doesn't strain the cartilage or inflame the tissue. It's just a release of pressure, a moment of movement, and then everything goes back to normal. That said, there are some minor downsides to habitual knuckle cracking, though they're not arthritis. Some studies suggest that people who crack their knuckles frequently may experience slight hand swelling or reduced grip strength over time. The effects are small and not clinically significant for most people, but they exist. There's also the social cost. The sound annoys people. It's distracting. It can be perceived as rude or nervous, but that's etiquette, not medicine. The persistence of this myth says something about how we process health information. We tend to trust warnings more than reassurances. If someone tells you something is dangerous, you remember it. If someone tells you it's harmless, you're skeptical. The negativity bias is strong. We're wired to avoid potential threats, even imaginary ones, because the cost of ignoring a real threat is high. Better safe than sorry, right? But in this case, the caution is misplaced. You're not protecting your joints by avoiding knuckle cracking. You're just obeying a myth. And myths, even harmless ones, deserve to be questioned. They clutter our understanding of the body. They make us second-guess normal behaviors. They turn natural, benign actions into sources of anxiety. So if you crack your knuckles, and it feels good, and it doesn't hurt, go ahead. You're not damaging anything. You're not setting yourself up for pain down the road. You're just releasing gas bubbles in synovial fluid, and that's perfectly fine. Your joints are designed to move, to bend, to pop occasionally. They're not fragile. They're not ticking time bomb. They're resilient, adaptive, and more forgiving than the myth gives them credit for. Some habits are just habits, not diseases in waiting. Cracking your knuckles is one of them. And knowing that, really knowing it, frees you from one more needless worry. But speaking of worries tied to timing, let's talk about eating at night, weight gain, and the myth that your body has a curfew. It's 9 o'clock at night, maybe 10. You're hungry. There's leftover pasta in the fridge, or some fruit, or a handful of crackers. But you hesitate. You've heard the rule. Don't eat after 7. Don't eat after 8. Calories consumed at night turn directly into fat. Your metabolism shuts down. Your body stores everything. Eating late makes you gain weight, so you go to bed hungry, virtuous, and quietly resentful. Except the rule is wrong. Eating at night does not inherently make you gain weight. Your body doesn't have a curfew. A calorie eaten at 8 in the morning is metabolically identical to a calorie eaten at 8 at night. What matters isn't when you eat. It's how much you eat, what you eat, and why you're eating. The clock on the wall has nothing to do with it. So, where did this myth come from? Partly from misunderstanding metabolism, partly from observing patterns without understanding causes, and partly from the diet industry, which loves simple rules that sound scientific but aren't. The idea that your metabolism slows down dramatically at night is appealing because it offers a clear villain. Nighttime. Avoid it, and you'll be thin. It's clean, actionable, and completely misleading. Let's start with metabolism, because that's where the myth claims to find its evidence. Your basal metabolic rate, the number of calories your body burns just to stay alive, does fluctuate slightly throughout the day. It's tied to your circadian rhythm, the internal clock that regulates sleep, hormone release, and dozens of other processes. Metabolism tends to be slightly higher in the morning and early afternoon, and slightly lower at night. But the difference is small. We're talking about a 5 to 10% variation, not a dramatic shutdown. Your body is still burning calories at night, your heart is still beating, your lungs are still breathing, your brain is still active. Your liver is still processing nutrients. Your cells are still doing the work of being alive. Nighttime isn't a metabolic dead zone. It's just slightly slower, and that difference is nowhere near enough to explain weight gain. The real issue with late-night eating isn't timing, it's behavior. Think about when and why people eat at night. It's often not because they're hungry, it's because they're bored, stressed, tired, or mindlessly snacking in front of the TV. Late-night eating tends to involve high-calorie, low-nutrient foods. Ice cream, chips, cookies, leftovers, eaten standing at the counter. The problem isn't the hour, it's the choices. Studies that control for total caloric intake, meaning they give people the same number of calories but shift when those calories are consumed, consistently show no difference in weight gain based on timing alone. If you eat 2,000 calories spread across 3 meals during the day, or 2,000 calories with most of them at night, your body processes them the same way. Total intake is what matters. The clock is irrelevant. There are observational studies that show a correlation between late-night eating and weight gain, but correlation isn't causation. People who eat late at night also tend to eat more overall. They skip breakfast, undereat during the day, and then overcompensate at night. They're adding a 4th meal on top of 3 normal ones, or they're eating emotionally rather than out of genuine hunger. The timing is a symptom, not the cause. Your body also doesn't stop digesting food just because the sun goes down. Digestion is a continuous process that takes hours. If you eat dinner at 6, your body is still processing that meal at 9, at midnight, even into the next morning. The idea that eating at 8 means the food sits undigested and turns into fat is a fundamental misunderstanding of how digestion works. Your stomach doesn't check the time before deciding whether to do its job. There's also a cultural component to this myth. In many parts of the world, dinner is eaten late. In Spain, people eat dinner at 10 or 11 at night. In Argentina, dinner routinely starts at 9 or 10. These cultures don't have higher obesity rates because of meal timing. What matters is overall diet quality, portion sizes, and lifestyle, not whether you eat before or after some arbitrary hour. That said, there are some nuances worth considering. Eating a very large meal right before bed can interfere with sleep quality. When your digestive system is working hard, it can cause discomfort, acid reflux, or restlessness. Lying down with a full stomach isn't ideal, but that's about comfort and sleep, not weight gain. A light snack before bed, a piece of fruit, or a small bowl of yogurt won't hurt you. It might even help you sleep if hunger is keeping you awake. There's also emerging research on circadian rhythms and metabolic health that suggests eating in alignment with your body's natural rhythms might have benefits. Some studies show that people who eat most of their calories earlier in the day report better energy levels and slightly improved metabolic markers. But again, this isn't about a magic cutoff time. It's about patterns, consistency, and listening to your body's cues. The myth also ignores individual variation. Some people are night owls. They stay up late, their bodies are active late, and eating at 10 at night is the equivalent of someone else eating at 7. Shift workers, people who work nights and sleep during the day, can't follow arbitrary daytime eating rules. Their schedules are inverted and their bodies adapt. The idea that everyone should stop eating by a certain hour ignores the reality of how diverse human lives actually are. So what should you do? Eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full, pay attention to what you're eating and why. If you're eating at night out of boredom, find something else to do. If you're genuinely hungry, eat something nutritious and reasonable. If a late snack helps you sleep, have it. Your body doesn't punish you for eating after dark. It just processes the food the same way it always does. The clock doesn't control your metabolism. Your choices do. The total amount you eat matters. The quality of what you eat matters. Your activity level matters. But the specific hour you consume a meal? That's a myth dressed up as science, and it's caused far too many people to go to bed hungry for no reason. Your body doesn't have a curfew. It's working around the clock, literally, keeping you alive, processing energy, maintaining balance. Trust it to do its job, regardless of what time the clock says. But speaking of things we're told will cleanse and purify us, let's talk about juice, detoxes, and the organs that have been doing the job all along. You've seen the ads: glowing skin, boundless energy, a fresh start. All you need is a 3-day juice cleanse. Drink nothing but cold-pressed kale, celery, lemon, and ginger, and your body will flush out toxins, reset your system, and transform you into the person you were always meant to be. It sounds appealing, it sounds scientific, and it sounds like exactly what your tired, sluggish, overworked body needs. Except it's not true. Juice cleanses don't detox your body. They can't, because your body is already detoxing itself constantly, efficiently, without any help from a $200 box of liquefied vegetables. You have organs specifically designed for this job. They're called your liver and your kidneys, and they've been working non-stop since the day you were born. So let's talk about what detox actually means, because the term has been co-opted by marketing departments and stripped of its medical meaning. In medicine, detoxification refers to the process of treating someone for drug or alcohol addiction, helping their body clear dangerous substances while managing withdrawal. It's serious, clinical, and supervised by doctors. That's detox. What wellness companies call detox is something else entirely. They use the word to suggest that your body is full of unnamed toxins, vague poisons that accumulate from food, air, stress, and modern life. These toxins, they claim, make you tired, bloated, foggy, and unhealthy, and the only way to get rid of them is to buy their product. But when you ask what these toxins actually are, the answer is always suspiciously vague. Your liver is one of the most sophisticated organs in your body. It filters your blood, breaking down harmful substances and converting them into waste products that can be safely excreted. Alcohol, medications, metabolic byproducts, environmental chemicals, your liver handles all of it. It works 24 hours a day, processing around 1.4 liters of blood every minute. That's detoxification. Real, measurable, life-sustaining detoxification. Your kidneys do something similar. They filter your blood, removing waste and excess substances, and turn them into urine. Every day, your kidneys process about 200 liters of blood and produce roughly 1 to 2 liters of urine. They regulate your fluid balance, maintain your electrolyte levels, and get rid of metabolic waste. They're detoxing you constantly, quietly, without you ever having to think about it. You also have your lungs, which expel carbon dioxide with every breath. Your skin, which sweats out small amounts of waste. Your digestive system, which eliminates solid waste. Your lymphatic system, which helps clear pathogens and cellular debris. You are a walking, breathing detoxification system. You don't need juice. You need organs. And you already have them. So why do juice cleanses feel like they work? Because they create dramatic, short-term changes that people mistake for health. You lose weight quickly, but that's not fat loss. It's water weight, glycogen depletion, and the emptying of your digestive tract. You're not burning fat. You're just eating far fewer calories than your body needs, and your body is reacting accordingly. You might also feel lighter less bloated. That makes sense. You've stopped eating solid food. Your digestive system has less to process. But that's not detoxification. That's just temporary emptiness. The moment you start eating normally again, the weight and the bloating come back. Nothing has been cleansed. Nothing has been reset. Some people report feeling energized during a cleanse, especially after the first day or two. That's often attributed to the detox working. But what's actually happening is a mild euphoria caused by calorie restriction and the release of certain hormones. It's the same feeling people get during fasting. It's not health. It's your body responding to deprivation. And then there are the people who feel terrible during a cleanse. Headaches, fatigue, irritability, dizziness, nausea. The juice companies call these detox symptoms, signs that toxins are leaving your body, but they're not. They're symptoms of low blood sugar, caffeine withdrawal if you've stopped drinking coffee, and inadequate nutrition. You're not detoxing, you're starving. Juice cleanses are also nutritionally incomplete. Yes, fruits and vegetables are healthy, but juice removes the fiber, the part of the plant that slows digestion, stabilizes blood sugar, and feeds your gut bacteria. What you're left with is liquid sugar, vitamins, and minerals, but without the structural benefits of whole food. Drinking 6 juices a day spikes your blood sugar repeatedly, stresses your pancreas, and leaves you hungry because there's no fiber to create satiety. You're also missing protein and fat, 2 macronutrients your body needs to function. Protein builds and repairs tissue. Fat supports hormone production, brain function, and nutrient absorption. A juice cleanse provides almost none of either. 3 days might not cause serious harm, but it's not doing you any favors either. There's also no evidence that juice cleanses improve long-term health. No peer-reviewed studies show that they reduce disease risk, improve liver function, or enhance metabolic health. The testimonials you see are anecdotal, often influenced by placebo, and almost always followed by a return to normal habits and normal weight. The appeal of the cleanse is psychological. It offers control, a reset button, a way to atone for overindulgence or poor habits. It feels like you're doing something active, something intentional, to improve your health. And in a world where health often feels overwhelming and confusing, that sense of control is powerful. But feeling like you're doing something and actually doing something useful are not the same. If you want to support your liver and kidneys, the science is clear. Drink enough water. Eat a balanced diet, rich in vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and lean protein. Limit alcohol. Avoid smoking. Get enough sleep. Exercise regularly. These aren't exciting. They don't promise rapid transformation, but they work. They give your organs what they need to do their jobs effectively. Your body is not dirty. It's not clogged with unnamed toxins that need flushing. It's a self-regulating system that's been refining its processes for millions of years of evolution. It knows how to detox. It's doing it right now, as you listen to this, as you breathe, as your blood circulates and your cells metabolize energy. The idea that you need to buy something, drink something, or deprive yourself to be clean is a myth. A profitable myth, but a myth nonetheless. Your liver doesn't need kale juice. It needs you to stop overloading it with things it has to work overtime to process. Your kidneys don't need lemon water. They need hydration and rest. So save your money. Eat real food. Trust your organs. They've been detoxing you since before you were born, and they'll keep doing it until the day you die. You don't need a cleanse. You just need to let your body do what it already knows how to do. But speaking of things your body already knows, Let's talk about carrots, vision, and a wartime lie that became nutritional advice. Eat your carrots. They're good for your eyes. You've heard it from parents, teachers, doctors, and well-meaning relatives who filled your plate with orange vegetables and promised better vision in return. Carrots will help you see in the dark, they said. Eat enough of them and you'll have sharp, clear, eagle-like eyesight. It's one of the most universally accepted pieces of nutritional wisdom, and it's rooted in a lie. Not a complete lie, mind you. Carrots do contain beta-carotene, which your body converts into vitamin A, and vitamin A is essential for eye health. But eating more carrots won't improve your vision beyond normal. They won't give you supervision. They won't let you see in the dark. And the reason we believe they will traces back to World War II, British propaganda, and a secret the military didn't want the enemy to know. Let's start with the truth, the small kernel of fact buried inside the myth. Vitamin A plays a critical role in vision, specifically in the function of the retina. Your retina contains photoreceptor cells called rods and cones. Rods help you see in low light. Cones handle color and detail. Both rely on a protein called rhodopsin, which requires vitamin A to function properly. If you're severely deficient in vitamin A, your night vision deteriorates. In extreme cases, prolonged deficiency can lead to xerophthalmia, a condition that causes dryness, ulcers, and eventually blindness. This is a real and serious problem in parts of the world where malnutrition is common. Vitamin A deficiency is one of the leading causes of preventable blindness in children globally. But here's the key. You only need enough vitamin A to maintain normal function. Once your body has what it needs, eating more doesn't improve your vision. It's like filling a gas tank. Once it's full, adding more fuel doesn't make your car go faster. Your eyes work the same way. If you're getting adequate vitamin A from your diet, and most people in developed countries are, extra carrots won't do anything for your eyesight. So why do we believe they will? The myth took root during World War II, specifically in 1940 when the British Royal Air Force was shooting down German planes at an impressive rate during nighttime raids. The British had a secret weapon, radar. It allowed their pilots to detect enemy aircraft in the dark with unprecedented accuracy. But radar was classified. The British didn't want the Germans to know they had it. So they invented a cover story. They told the press, and by extension the public and the enemy, that their pilots had exceptional night vision because they ate lots of carrots. The story was picked up by newspapers, turned into posters, and used in propaganda campaigns encouraging British citizens to eat carrots, which were plentiful and not rationed. Carrots became a patriotic vegetable, a symbol of resilience and ingenuity. The campaign was wildly successful. People believed it. The Germans may have believed it too, or at least didn't uncover the radar secret right away. And after the war, the myth didn't fade. It had embedded itself too deeply into culture. Parents repeated it to children, schools taught it, and carrots earned a permanent, undeserved reputation as a vision-enhancing superfood. The irony is that carrots are good for you. They're low in calories, high in fiber, and rich in antioxidants. Beta-carotene, the compound that gives carrots their orange color, is converted into vitamin A in your body, and it also acts as an antioxidant, protecting cells from damage. Eating carrots is a healthy choice, but so is eating sweet potatoes, spinach, kale, butternut squash, or any other vegetable high in beta-carotene or vitamin A. Carrots aren't unique, they're not magic, and they won't fix nearsightedness, farsightedness, astigmatism, or any other refractive error. Those are structural issues with the shape of your eye, and no amount of vegetables will reshape your cornea or lengthen your eyeball. If you need glasses, you need glasses. Carrots won't change that. There's also a risk in thinking that one food is the answer to a specific health concern. It leads to nutritional tunnel vision, ironically. People focus on eating carrots for their eyes and ignore the fact that a balanced diet, rich in a variety of nutrients, is what actually supports overall health, including eye health. Your eyes need more than just vitamin A. They need vitamin C, vitamin E, zinc, omega-3 fatty acids, and lutein, a compound found in leafy greens. In fact, studies on age-related macular degeneration, a leading cause of vision loss in older adults, have found that a combination of nutrients, not just vitamin A, can slow the progression of the disease. The AREDS and AREDS, two studies, large clinical trials funded by the National Eye Institute, identified a specific mix of vitamins and minerals that help protect the retina. Carrots alone wouldn't provide that protection. You need variety. The myth also perpetuates a misunderstanding of how nutrition works. Food isn't medicine in the way the myth suggests. You can't eat a specific vegetable and target a specific organ for improvement. Your body is a system. Nutrients are distributed where they're needed based on complex biological priorities. Eating carrots sends beta-carotene into your bloodstream, where it's converted to vitamin A and used by your eyes, yes, but also by your skin, your immune system, your reproductive organs, and your mucous membranes. There's also the issue of balance. You can actually eat too much beta-carotene. It's rare, but if you consume excessive amounts, your skin can take on an orange tint, a condition called carotenemia. It's harmless and reversible, but it's a reminder that more isn't always better, even with vegetables. So what should you take away from all this? Carrots are good for you. Eat them, enjoy them. They're a healthy part of a balanced diet. But don't eat them expecting your vision to sharpen. Don't expect to see better in the dark or read smaller print. That's not how it works. If you're getting enough vitamin A, and again, most people are, your eyes are already functioning at their best. And if you're concerned about your vision, the best things you can do are regular eye exams, protecting your eyes from UV light with sunglasses, taking breaks from screens to reduce eye strain, and yes, eating a varied diet full of colorful fruits and vegetables. Not just carrots, all of them. The carrot myth is a fascinating example of how wartime propaganda can become nutritional advice. It shows how a useful lie, told for strategic reasons, can outlive its purpose and become accepted truth. And it reminds us that even well-meaning myths, even ones that encourage healthy eating, should still be questioned. Carrots are good for you, but they won't give you supervision. They won't let you throw away your glasses. They're just vegetables, doing what vegetables do, providing nutrients your body needs to function. And that's enough. They don't need to be magic. But speaking of misunderstandings about where we come from, let's talk about evolution, common ancestors, and the myth that refuses to leave the conversation. You've probably heard the question, or maybe even asked it yourself. If humans evolved from chimpanzees, why are there still chimpanzees? It sounds like a gotcha, a clever challenge to evolution that exposes some fundamental flaw in the theory. And if you don't understand how evolution actually works, it does sound confusing. But the question is based on a misunderstanding, a myth so common it's become a punchline. Humans did not evolve from chimpanzees. We never did. What actually happened is more interesting, more complex, and more accurate. Humans and chimpanzees share a common ancestor. Millions of years ago, there was a species that no longer exists, a species that eventually split into two lineages. One lineage led to modern chimpanzees and bonobos. The other led to us. We're cousins, not descendants. We're branches on the same tree, not rungs on a ladder. This distinction matters because it reflects a fundamental misunderstanding of how evolution works. Evolution is not a straight line. It's not a progression from simple to complex, from primitive to advanced, from ape to human. It's a branching process, a tree with countless limbs splitting off in different directions, each adapting to its own environment, facing its own challenges, developing its own traits. The common ancestor we share with chimpanzees lived somewhere between 6 and 7 million years ago in Africa. We don't have a complete fossil of this ancestor. We have fragments, clues, pieces of bone that hint at what it might have looked like. It probably walked on all fours, lived in trees, and had a smaller brain than modern humans or modern chimps. It wasn't a chimpanzee. It wasn't a human. It was something else, something that existed in a world we can only reconstruct from stone and soil. At some point, this ancestral population split. Maybe a geographical barrier formed, a river or a mountain range that divided the group. Maybe food sources changed, pushing different populations into different ecological niches. Maybe it was just chance, random genetic drift that caused two populations to diverge. Whatever the reason, the split happened, and over millions of years, the two lineages evolved separately. One lineage stayed in the forests, adapting to life in the trees, developing the traits we see in modern chimpanzees. Strong arms for climbing, a diet heavy in fruit and plants, social structures built around small, tight-knit groups. The other lineage, our lineage, moved into the savannas. We adapted to walking upright, freeing our hands to carry tools and food. Our brains grew larger, our social structures became more complex. We learned to use fire, language, and abstract thought. But here's the important part. Chimpanzees didn't stop evolving. They didn't freeze in time, waiting for us to catch up or surpass them. They continued adapting, changing, responding to their environment just as we did. The chimpanzees alive today are not our ancestors. They're modern animals, just as evolved as we are, just as adapted to their environment as we are to ours. They're the product of millions of years of natural selection, shaped by the same forces that shaped us. The myth that we evolved from chimps reflects a broader misunderstanding. The idea that evolution has a direction, a goal, an endpoint. It doesn't. Evolution doesn't aim for intelligence or complexity or anything else. It just responds to pressure. What traits help an organism survive long enough to reproduce? Those traits get passed on. What traits are neutral or harmful? Those fade away. There's no plan, no hierarchy, no species that's more evolved than another. That's why the question, why are there still chimpanzees, doesn't make sense. Chimpanzees exist because they're good at being chimpanzees. They're successful in their environment. They reproduce. They survive. Evolution didn't replace them with us. It produced both of us from a shared starting point. Think of it this way. Imagine two siblings who grow up in the same house and then move to different countries. One moves to a cold climate and learns to ski, dress warmly, and appreciate long nights. The other moves to a tropical island and learns to swim, build shelters from storms, and navigate by the stars. They both change, but in different ways. Neither one is more evolved. They're both adapted to their circumstances. That's what happened with humans and chimps just over millions of years instead of decades. We also share traits with chimpanzees that reveal our common ancestry. Our DNA is about 98.8% identical. We have similar bone structures, similar organs, similar developmental processes. We both have opposable thumbs, forward-facing eyes, and complex social behaviors. These similarities aren't coincidences. They're inheritances from that shared ancestor. But the differences are significant too. Our brains are about 3 times larger relative to body size. We walk upright efficiently, something chimps can do but not for long distances. We have a descended larynx that allows for complex speech. We've lost most of our body hair. These changes happened gradually through mutation, selection, and time. And it's not just chimps. We share common ancestors with every living thing on Earth. Go back far enough and we share an ancestor with gorillas, orangutans, monkeys, mammals, reptiles, fish, even plants and bacteria. The tree of life connects all of us. Some branches are closer, some are distant, but we're all part of the same story. The myth that we evolved from chimps also feeds into misconceptions about what evolution can and can't explain. Evolution explains the diversity of life, the way species change over time, the patterns we see in fossils and DNA. It doesn't explain the origin of life itself. That's a different question, one scientists are still investigating. But evolution, the change in populations over generations, is supported by overwhelming evidence from genetics, paleontology, comparative anatomy, and direct observation. We've watched evolution happen in real time. Bacteria develop resistance to antibiotics, insects adapt to pesticides. Finch beaks change shape in response to droughts. These are small changes, microevolution, but they're the same process that, given enough time, produces large changes, macroevolution. The difference is scale, not mechanism. Understanding evolution correctly changes how we see ourselves. We're not the pinnacle of creation. We're not the goal or the end point. We're one branch among millions, successful in our own way, but not inherently superior. We're animals, mammals, primates, shaped by the same forces that shaped everything else. And that's humbling, grounding, and strangely beautiful. So no, humans didn't evolve from chimpanzees. We evolved alongside them, from a shared ancestor, along separate paths, adapting to different worlds. Chimpanzees are still here because they're still thriving in theirs. And we're still here, for now, because we've managed to thrive in ours. Evolution is not a ladder. It's a tree, branching endlessly, and we're just one twig among countless others. But speaking of nature not keeping score, let's talk about lightning, tall buildings, and a saying that's never been true. Lightning never strikes the same place twice. It's a saying you've heard your entire life, used to reassure, to comfort, to suggest that bad luck doesn't repeat itself. If something terrible has already happened, you're safe. You've paid your dues. The universe won't target you again. It's a comforting thought, a poetic idea, and it's completely, demonstrably false. Lightning strikes the same place twice all the time. In fact, it strikes some places hundreds of times a year. Tall buildings, metal towers, open fields, mountaintops, anywhere that offers the path of least resistance between the sky and the ground. Lightning will return, again and again, without hesitation or memory. Nature doesn't keep score. It doesn't track what it's already hit. It just follows physics.
So where did this myth come from? Probably from the sheer randomness of lightning strikes.
If you're standing in an open field during a storm and lightning strikes near you, the odds of it striking that exact spot again, in that exact moment, are astronomically low. The storm is moving, the electrical charge is dispersing, the conditions are changing. So in that narrow human timescale, it feels true. Lightning struck once, it moved on, and it's never coming back. But zoom out, extend the timeline. Look at the same location over months, years, decades, and the pattern changes. Lightning doesn't avoid places it's already struck. It seeks them out, over and over, because those places have the characteristics that attract lightning in the first place. Height, conductivity, isolation. A tree on a hill, a metal rod on a roof, a skyscraper in a city. These are lightning magnets, and they get hit repeatedly. Take the Empire State Building, one of the most famous examples. It's struck by lightning around 25 times a year. Some years more, some years less. But on average, it's a reliable target. The building is tall, made of metal, and surrounded by lower structures. When a storm rolls through New York City, the Empire State Building is often the easiest path for electrical discharge. Lightning doesn't care that it hit the building yesterday or last week. It just follows the path of least resistance. The same is true for lightning rods, which are specifically designed to be struck repeatedly. Benjamin Franklin invented the lightning rod in the 1750s after observing that pointed metal objects attracted electrical charge. The rod provides a safe, conductive path for lightning to travel from the sky to the ground, protecting the building beneath it. And it works because lightning does strike the same place twice. That's the whole point. So, how does lightning actually work? It starts with a thunderstorm, where updrafts and downdrafts create friction between ice particles and water droplets. This friction generates an electrical charge. The top of the cloud becomes positively charged, the bottom becomes negatively charged, and the ground beneath the storm becomes positively charged in response. When the difference in charge becomes too great, the atmosphere can no longer insulate the two regions. A channel of ionized air forms, a pathway for electrons to flow. That's the lightning bolt. It travels from the cloud to the ground, or sometimes from the ground to the cloud, following the path of least resistance. It happens in milliseconds, but the energy released is enormous. A single bolt can carry up to 1 billion volts and heat the air around it to 30,000 degrees Celsius, 5 times hotter than the surface of the Sunday. Lightning doesn't choose its target based on history. It chooses based on present conditions. What's the tallest object? What's the most conductive? What offers the easiest path to the ground? A tree that's been struck before is still tall. A metal tower that's been hit is still conductive. The characteristics that made it a target the first time are still there the second, third, and 100th time. There are also places on Earth that are struck by lightning far more often than others. Lake Maracaibo in Venezuela holds the record for the most lightning activity on the planet. The Catatumbo lightning, as it's called, occurs up to 260 nights a year, producing thousands of strikes per hour. The unique geography, the warm water, the surrounding mountains, all create perfect conditions for continuous electrical storms. Lightning strikes the same place not just twice, but thousands of times, night after night. The myth also ignores the experiences of people who've been struck by lightning more than once. Roy Sullivan, a park ranger in Virginia, was struck by lightning 7 times between 1942 and 1977. 7 times. He survived all of them, though not without injuries. His story is extraordinary, but it's not supernatural. He worked outdoors in a region with frequent thunderstorms. He was often the tallest object in open areas. He was unlucky, yes, but not because lightning broke some cosmic rule. He was just in the wrong place, repeatedly. The saying, "Lightning never strikes the same place twice," is really about probability and human perception. In any given moment, the odds of lightning hitting one specific spot are incredibly low. But over time, over repeated storms, over a lifetime, those odds shift. If a location is consistently attractive to lightning, it will be struck repeatedly. The universe doesn't remember. It doesn't play fair. It just follows the laws of physics. This myth also offers false comfort in other areas of life. People use it metaphorically, applying it to bad luck, tragedy, or disaster. "You've already been through something terrible," they say, "so surely it won't happen again." But life doesn't work that way either. Probability doesn't reset just because something has already occurred. If the conditions that caused the first event are still present, the event can, and often will, happen again. That doesn't mean you should live in fear. It means you should understand risk realistically. If you're in a thunderstorm, don't stand under a tree that's already been struck. It's not safer. It's actually more dangerous because damaged trees conduct electricity better. If you've experienced a health scare, don't assume you're immune to another. Take precautions. Change the conditions. Lightning is not sentient. It doesn't avoid or target. It doesn't remember or forget. It's electricity seeking the ground, following the path of least resistance, indifferent to what came before. And that's the truth. Nature doesn't keep score. It just keeps moving, striking the same places over and over, as long as those places remain the easiest path. But speaking of things we're irrationally afraid of, let's talk about spiders, sleep, and a statistic that never had any basis in reality. You've heard the statistic. You swallow 8 spiders a year in your sleep. Maybe you heard it was 5, maybe 10. The number changes depending on who's telling the story, but the core claim stays the same. While you're unconscious, vulnerable, mouth slightly open, spiders crawl across your face and into your mouth. You swallow them without waking. It happens to everyone. It's inevitable, and it's absolutely, completely made up. You do not swallow spiders in your sleep. Not 8, not 1. The entire claim is a fabrication, a hoax, a piece of internet folklore designed to prove how easily false information spreads. And it worked. And fabrication. The myth has circulated for decades, repeated in classrooms, shared at sleepovers, whispered with disgust and horror. But it was never true, not even a little bit. The origin of the myth is surprisingly well documented. In 1993, a journalist named Lisa Holst wrote an article for PC Professional magazine about how people believe ridiculous things they read online. To prove her point, she made up a list of absurd fake facts, including the claim that people swallow 8 spiders a year in their sleep. She even cited a non-existent book from the 1950s as her source. It was satire. It was meant to be obviously false. But the internet doesn't do nuance well. The fake fact was stripped from its context, shared without attribution, and repeated so many times it became accepted as truth. By the time people started questioning it, the myth had already embedded itself into popular culture. And once a myth takes root, especially one that triggers disgust and fear, it's nearly impossible to pull out. So let's talk about why this claim makes no sense, starting with spider behavior. Spiders are not interested in you. They're not drawn to your warmth, your breath, or your sleeping body. In fact, they actively avoid humans. We're loud, large, and dangerous. From a spider's perspective, you're an unpredictable predator. The vibrations you create when you breathe, shift, or snore are enough to send most spiders scurrying in the opposite direction. Spiders also don't wander aimlessly. They're ambush predators or web builders. They stay in places where they can hunt effectively. Corners, crevices, under furniture, near light sources that attract insects. Your bed is not a hunting ground. There's no food there. No flies, no mosquitoes, nothing worth a spider's time. Crawling onto your face offers no survival advantage. It's just risk with no reward. Now, let's talk about your body's defenses. Because even if a spider did wander onto your face, it's not making it into your mouth. When you sleep, your body is still aware of its surroundings, especially near sensitive areas like your face. You have nerve endings that detect touch, movement, even the faint brush of a leg or hair. If something crawls on your face, you'll feel it. Your body will react. You'll twitch, swat, wake up, or at the very least shift position. Your mouth also isn't just hanging open, inviting things inside. Even when you sleep with your mouth slightly open, your tongue is usually pressed against the roof of your mouth or resting in a position that blocks easy entry. Your gag reflex is still active. If something foreign touches the back of your throat, you'll cough, choke, or wake up. Swallowing a spider would require bypassing all of these defenses, and that's highly unlikely. There's also the question of evidence. If people were swallowing 8 spiders a year, that would be billions of spiders globally. We'd see signs, partially digested spiders in medical exams, reports from sleep studies, some kind of documented pattern, but there's nothing. No credible study, no medical literature, no entomologist who's ever confirmed this claim, because it doesn't happen. The myth persists, partly because of how it makes us feel. It's visceral, disgusting. The idea of something crawling into your mouth while you're helpless taps into primal fears. We're wired to be afraid of things that invade our bodies without consent. Parasites, insects, anything that violates our boundaries. The spider myth hijacks that fear, making it feel urgent and real, even though it's not. It also spreads easily because it's a story people want to tell. Gross out facts are social currency. They get reactions. They're memorable. Telling someone they swallow spiders in their sleep is a way to shock, to disgust, to bond over shared revulsion. And once you've told the story, you've reinforced it in your own mind. Repetition makes myths feel true, even when they're not. There's also a cognitive bias at play called the illusory truth effect. The more often you hear something, the more likely you are to believe it, regardless of whether it's accurate. The spider myth has been repeated so many times in so many contexts that it feels familiar, and familiarity breeds credibility, even when it shouldn't. But let's be clear, spiders are not your enemy. They're not invading your personal space. They're beneficial creatures that eat mosquitoes, flies, and other pests. Most spiders are harmless to humans. They don't bite unless threatened, and even then, most bites are no worse than a mosquito bite. The fear we have of spiders, arachnophobia, is disproportionate to the actual danger they pose.
The spider swallowing myth amplifies that fear unnecessarily.
It turns a mostly harmless creature into a nighttime threat, something that violates you while you're asleep. And that fear can lead to irrational behavior. People kill spiders on sight, fumigate their homes, lose sleep worrying about something that isn't happening. Fear is exhausting, and when that fear is based on fiction, it's even more frustrating. So let's put this myth to rest once and for all. You are not swallowing spiders in your sleep. You never have. You never will. Spiders avoid you. Your body protects you. And the statistic that started this whole panic was a joke, a piece of satire that escaped into the wild and took on a life of its own. The next time someone repeats this myth, you can gently correct them. Tell them about Lisa Holst, about spider behavior, about the lack of evidence. Tell them it was a hoax designed to prove how easily misinformation spreads. And maybe, just maybe, we can stop this particular myth from crawling any further. Fear makes fiction feel like fact, especially when that fiction is repeated often enough. But you deserve the truth. And the truth is, your bed is safe. Your sleep is undisturbed. And the only thing you're swallowing at night is air, saliva, and maybe the occasional bit of dust. No spiders. Not now. Not ever. But speaking of creatures we misunderstand, let's talk about bats, darkness, and a phrase that's been wrong from the start. Blind as a bat. It's a phrase embedded so deeply in language that we use it without thinking. Someone can't see without their glasses? Blind as a bat. Someone misses an obvious detail? Blind as a bat. The saying is everywhere, confident, casual, and completely wrong. Bats are not blind, not even close. In fact, most bats see quite well, and some can even see in color. So where did this myth come from? Probably from watching bats fly at night, darting and swooping through the darkness with seemingly impossible precision. They don't crash into trees, they don't collide with each other, they navigate complex environments in complete darkness. And to observers who didn't understand how, it seemed like magic, or like the bats were relying on something other than sight. So the assumption took hold. Bats must be blind. They must be using some other sense to fly. That second part is true. Bats do use another sense. It's called echolocation, and it's one of the most sophisticated biological sonar systems in the natural world. Bats emit high-frequency sounds, usually ultrasonic, meaning humans can't hear them. These sounds bounce off objects in the environment and return to the bat's ears. By analyzing the echoes, the time delay, the intensity, the frequency shifts, bats can build a detailed mental map of their surroundings. They can detect the size, shape, distance, and even texture of objects. They can tell the difference between a moth and a leaf, between a branch and a wire. They can hunt insects in mid-air, snatching them out of the sky with remarkable accuracy. Echolocation is so effective that bats can navigate and hunt in total darkness, no light required. It's an extraordinary ability, one that's often compared to a sixth sense. But here's the critical point. Echolocation is not a replacement for vision. It's an addition. Bats have both. They use echolocation when flying at night or in dark caves where vision is limited, but they also use their eyes, especially in low light or during the day. Vision and echolocation work together, giving bats a more complete picture of their environment than either sense alone could provide. Bat vision varies by species. Most bats have large eyes relative to their body size, and their retinas are packed with rod cells, the photoreceptors that detect light and movement in dim conditions. This makes them well adapted to seeing at dawn, dusk, and under moonlight. Some species, particularly fruit bats, have even better vision. They rely on it heavily to find food, navigate through dense forests, and recognize landmarks. Fruit bats, also called megabats or flying foxes, have especially large eyes and can see in color. They don't use echolocation at all, at least not the sophisticated kind that insect-eating bats use. Instead, they depend almost entirely on vision and smell to locate ripe fruit in the canopy. Their eyes are adapted to detect the subtle color differences between ripe and unripe fruit, helping them forage efficiently. Even among echolocating bats, vision plays an important role. Studies have shown that bats use visual landmarks to navigate over long distances. They remember the location of roosts, feeding areas, and water sources by sight. When researchers temporarily impaired bats' vision in controlled experiments, the bats struggled to find familiar locations, even though their echolocation was unaffected. This suggests that vision and echolocation are integrated, each contributing to the bat's understanding of space. The myth also underestimates how diverse bats are as a group. There are over 1,400 species of bats, nearly a quarter of all mammal species on Earth. They range in size from the bumblebee bat, which weighs less than 2 grams, to flying foxes with wingspans over 1.5 meters. They live on every continent except Antarctica. They eat insects, fruit, nectar, pollen, fish, blood, and even other bats. To assume they all have the same sensory abilities is like assuming all birds are the same. The phrase, blind as a bat, also reflects a broader human bias. We tend to define other animals by what they lack compared to us, rather than what they excel at. We notice that bats don't see the way we do, and we label them as blind. But bats aren't missing anything. They're optimized for a different way of life. They're nocturnal hunters and foragers, and their senses reflect that. Echolocation isn't compensation for poor vision. It's an adaptation that allows them to thrive in environments where we would be helpless. There's also something poetic about echolocation that the myth misses. Bats don't just see the world, they hear it. They send out sound and listen to the echoes, interpreting the shape of reality through audio feedback. It's a form of perception that's almost alien to us, something we can barely imagine. And yet, it works. Bats navigate, hunt, and survive using a sensory system we don't have. That's not blindness. That's brilliance. Understanding bat vision also changes how we think about their behavior. When a bat flies close to you at dusk, it's not because it can't see you. It's because it has seen you and determined you're not a threat, or it's chasing an insect that happened to pass near you. Bats are aware of their surroundings in ways we're only beginning to understand. They're not stumbling through the dark. They're navigating with precision. The myth has other consequences too. It contributes to the fear and misunderstanding that surrounds bats. People see them as creepy, chaotic, unpredictable, but bats are gentle, intelligent, and incredibly important to ecosystems. They pollinate plants, disperse seeds, and control insect populations. A single bat can eat thousands of mosquitoes in one night. Without bats, we'd face ecological collapse in many regions. But fear and myth make it harder to protect them. Bat populations are declining worldwide due to habitat loss, disease, and human persecution. White nose syndrome, a fungal infection, has killed millions of bats in North America. Climate change is disrupting their migration and hibernation patterns, and in some places, bats are still killed out of superstition or fear. Correcting myths like blind as a bat is a small step, but it's part of a larger effort to change how we see these animals. So no, bats are not blind. They see, they hear, they navigate with a sophistication that rivals any creature on Earth. The phrase is a relic of ignorance, a time when we didn't understand what bats were capable of. But now we know better. And knowing better means we can appreciate them for what they are, not as blind creatures stumbling through the night, but as masters of their environment, equipped with senses we're only beginning to understand. Darkness doesn't mean blindness. It just means a different way of seeing, and bats have perfected that way over millions of years. But speaking of things we learned wrong in school, let's talk about your tongue, taste, and a map that was never accurate. You probably remember the diagram from elementary school, a drawing of a tongue, color-coded into neat sections. Sweet at the tip, salty on the sides near the front, sour along the edges toward the back, and bitter at the very back. It was simple, memorable, and used in classrooms around the world. Teachers pointed to it. Textbooks printed it. You might have even traced your own tongue with your finger, trying to match the sensations to the map, and all of it was wrong. Your tongue does not have a taste map. All taste buds, no matter where they are on your tongue, can detect all 5 basic tastes: sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. There are no specialized zones, no regions that only taste one thing. The map is a fiction, a mistranslation, a scientific error that somehow became educational gospel for over a century.
So, where did this myth come from? The story begins in 1901 with a German scientist named David Hannig. He conducted experiments to measure taste sensitivity across different areas of the tongue. He asked subjects to taste solutions of varying concentrations and report when they could detect them. What he found was that sensitivity varied slightly. Some areas were a tiny bit more responsive to certain tastes than others. Tiny, almost negligible. Hannig published his findings in a doctoral thesis, complete with a graph showing these subtle differences. But the graph was misunderstood. Later researchers looked at it and assumed the areas with lower sensitivity had no sensitivity at all. They turned Hannig's nuanced observations into rigid categories: sweet here, bitter there, sour on the sides. The taste map was born, not from Hannig's data, but from a misreading of it. The myth was further entrenched in 1942 when Harvard psychologist Edwin Boring published a textbook that included a simplified, exaggerated version of Hannig's findings. Boring's textbook was widely read, widely cited, and the taste map spread through academic literature, then into educational materials, and finally, into every science classroom. By the time anyone thought to question it, generations had already learned it as fact. But here's the truth. Your tongue is covered in thousands of taste buds, small clusters of sensory cells located mostly on the papillae, the tiny bumps you can see and feel on your tongue's surface. Each taste bud contains 50 to 100 taste receptor cells, and these cells are not specialized by location. A taste bud on the tip of your tongue has the same types of receptors as a taste bud on the back or sides. When you eat something, molecules from the food dissolve in your saliva and bind to receptors on the taste cells. Different molecules bind to different receptors, triggering signals that travel through nerves to your brain. Your brain interprets these signals as taste: sweet, salty, sour, bitter, umami. But this process happens everywhere on your tongue, not just in specific zones. You can test this yourself. Put a pinch of sugar on the back of your tongue where the map says only bitter should register. You'll taste sweet. Put something bitter, like unsweetened cocoa powder, on the tip of your tongue. You'll taste bitter.
The map falls apart immediately under even the most basic observation. And yet, it persisted for decades because it was simple, because it was taught, and because most people never thought to question it. There are some slight differences in sensitivity, the small variations Hannig originally observed. The tip of your tongue might be marginally more sensitive to sweet tastes. The back might respond a bit more to bitter. But these differences are so minor that they don't affect your everyday experience of eating. You taste all flavors, everywhere, all the time, simultaneously. Taste is also more complex than the map suggests. The 5 basic tastes, sweet, salty, sour, bitter, umami, are just the starting point. Your perception of flavor involves far more than taste alone. It includes smell, which contributes the majority of what we think of as flavor. It includes texture, temperature, even sound. The crunch of a chip, the creaminess of ice cream, the burn of spicy food. These are all part of the eating experience, but they're not taste in the strict sense. Umami, the 5th taste, wasn't even recognized in Western science until relatively recently. It's a savory, meaty flavor found in foods like mushrooms, soy sauce, aged cheese, and tomatoes. The Japanese scientist Kikune Ikeda identified it in 1908, but it wasn't widely accepted in Western science until the late 20th century. The taste map, already outdated, never included umami at all. The persistence of the taste map is a lesson in how hard it is to correct scientific misinformation once it's embedded in education. Even though researchers debunked the map decades ago, it's still occasionally found in textbooks, classroom posters, and casual conversation. Once something is taught to children, it gets passed on. Teachers who learned it teach it to the next generation, and myths become traditions. There's also a psychological comfort in the map. It makes taste feel organized, understandable, predictable. We like categories. We like the idea that the body has clear divisions, that everything has its place. The taste map offers that illusion of order, but biology is messy. It doesn't follow neat lines, and pretending it does might make teaching easier, but it doesn't make it accurate. The myth also underestimates the elegance of the real system. Your tongue doesn't need specialized zones because every taste bud is a complete sensory unit. Redundancy is built into the system. If you damage part of your tongue, you don't lose the ability to taste certain flavors. You still have taste buds everywhere else, doing the same job. It's a resilient, distributed system, far more sophisticated than the map ever suggested. And this points to a broader truth about science. It's not a collection of permanent facts. It's a process of questioning, testing, and refining. Sometimes we get things wrong. Sometimes we misinterpret data or oversimplify for convenience. But science corrects itself. New evidence replaces old errors. The taste map should have been corrected decades ago, but the process is slow, especially in education. Still, the correction is happening. Modern textbooks are more accurate. Teachers are learning the truth and passing it on. And myths, like the taste map, are slowly fading. But it takes time. It takes people willing to question what they were taught, to look at the evidence, and to accept that something they learned as fact was actually fiction. So the next time you eat something, pay attention. Notice that you taste sweetness, bitterness, saltiness all over your tongue at once. Notice that the map doesn't match your experience. And remember that even science, even education, gets things wrong sometimes. But that's okay, because the truth, when we finally get it right, is always more interesting than the myth. Your tongue is not divided. It's unified, covered in taste buds that work together to give you the full, rich, complex experience of flavor, and that's far more beautiful than any map. Even science gets things wrong, and that's okay. It corrects itself. But now that we've walked through 15 myths together, let's bring it all home. So here we are, 15 myths, 15 truths, and somewhere in between, a clearer picture of your body, your mind, and the world you thought you understood. You started tonight carrying beliefs you didn't choose, ideas handed down through generations, repeated in classrooms, whispered at dinner tables, printed in textbooks that never corrected themselves. But now you know better. You know that your brain isn't lazy, holding back 90% of its power like some neurological miser. It's working at full capacity, constantly, quietly, keeping you alive and aware without you ever having to ask. You know that you don't have 5 senses. You have dozens, tracking your body in space, monitoring temperature, balance, pain, time, and the subtle signals from organs you never think about but couldn't live without. You know that goldfish aren't forgetful, that your head doesn't leak heat like a broken radiator, that sugar doesn't turn children into chaos agents, and that 8 glasses of water is a rule without reason. You know that cracking your knuckles won't cripple you, that eating at night won't make you gain weight just because the clock says so, and that juice cleanses can't detox organs that have been detoxing you since before you were born. You know that carrots won't sharpen your vision beyond what's normal, that humans didn't evolve from chimpanzees but alongside them, and that lightning doesn't avoid places it's already struck. You know that you're not swallowing spiders in your sleep, that bats are not blind, and that your tongue has no taste map, just thousands of taste buds doing the same job everywhere at once. These myths, all 15 of them, share something in common. They're simple, they're memorable, they sound true. And that's why they spread, because the human brain loves shortcuts. We like explanations that fit on a bumper sticker, facts that don't require footnotes, and stories that confirm what we already believe. Nuance is hard. Complexity is exhausting. So we simplify, even when simplifying means getting it wrong. But here's what we lose when we cling to myths. We lose accuracy, yes, but we also lose wonder, because the truth, the real, messy, complicated truth, is almost always more interesting than the myth. Your brain using 100% of itself is more impressive than imagining untapped potential. Your senses numbering in the dozens is more fascinating than limiting yourself to 5. Evolution as a branching tree is more elegant than a ladder. And your body detoxing itself constantly without help is more miraculous than any juice ever could be. Myths also breed unnecessary fear. Fear of spiders crawling into your mouth, fear of arthritis from harmless habits, fear of eating when you're hungry just because the sun went down, fear of your own body, as if it's fragile, broken, or working against you. But your body is not your enemy. It's extraordinarily resilient, adaptive, and intelligent. It doesn't need to be fixed by fads or frightened into submission by myths. It just needs to be understood. And that's what tonight was really about. Not just debunking myths, but building trust. Trust in science, yes, but more importantly, trust in yourself. Trust that your body knows what it's doing. Trust that thirst means drink, hunger means eat, and tiredness means rest. Trust that the signals you receive are worth listening to, not overriding with arbitrary rules invented by people who didn't know any better. Letting go of myths is humbling. It means admitting you believe something false, maybe for years, maybe your whole life. It means accepting that teachers, parents, textbooks all got it wrong. But that humility is also freeing, because once you stop defending what you thought was true, you make space for what actually is true. And the truth is always worth the discomfort of unlearning.
Science is not a collection of facts carved in stone.
It's a conversation, a process, a willingness to say we were wrong, and here's what we know now. The taste map was taught for a century before being corrected. Carrots became a vision cure because of wartime propaganda. The 10% brain myth spread because it sounded empowering. These weren't malicious lies. They were mistakes, misunderstandings, and oversimplifications. But science corrected them, slowly, because that's what science does. And you can do the same. You can question what you've been told. You can ask for evidence. You can notice when something doesn't match your lived experience and trust that dissonance. You don't have to accept myths just because they're repeated. You don't have to believe something just because everyone else does. Curiosity is not disrespect. Skepticism is not cynicism. They're tools, and they're yours to use. Tonight, you've taken 15 myths and replaced them with 15 truths. But more than that, you've practiced a way of thinking, a way of asking, is this really true? A way of looking past the surface and seeing the complexity underneath. A way of appreciating your body not as a machine you've mastered, but as a mystery still unfolding, still revealing itself, still surprising you. So, as you drift off to sleep tonight, let these truths settle in. Let the myths fade. Let yourself rest, knowing that your body is not broken, your senses are not limited, and your understanding of the world is just a little bit clearer than it was an hour ago. You're not swallowing spiders. You're not losing heat through your head. You're not using 10% of your brain. You're whole, complete, and far more capable than the myths ever gave you credit for. Before you go, if you learned something tonight, if any of these truths surprised you or changed how you see yourself, take a moment to like this video. Subscribe if you want more nights like this, more myths unraveled, more truths uncovered, and leave a comment. Tell me which myth shocked you the most. Tell me what you believed for years, and just let go of tonight. Tell me where you're tuning in from and whether you're drifting off or wide awake. I read every comment, and I love hearing from you. And here's a question to take with you into sleep. What other myths are you carrying? What other beliefs about your body, your health, your limits have you accepted without question? Maybe tonight is just the beginning. Maybe there are more truths waiting for you, more myths ready to fall away, more ways to see yourself clearly. Now, let the myths fade, let the truth settle in, and let yourself drift off into sleep, knowing your body a little better than you did before. Good night.